Now, the person we have to thank for the high-level computer programming languages that we use and love today is one of my most favorite people of all time, who is Grace Hopper. She is the inventor of what is called the compiler, and what a compiler is a computer program that translates the code that we're writing in a high-level computer language down to the machine language of the computer. Now, in addition to all of her marvelous accomplishments in computer science, Grace Hopper was a US Navy admiral and she has a PhD in mathematics from Yale University. She was known to say, why should people have to learn computer language? Why can't computers learn people language? Which was the foundation of this high-level programming language. In fact, when Grace Hopper had this idea originally, she was told by her bosses that this was absolutely impossible, that a computer could never be taught the English language, and she defied her bosses to go on and invent the high-level programming language called COBOL, which is still used today. Very powerful high-level programming language, and one of the first ever created by Grace Hopper. There's another thing that modern computer scientists do every single day, which is when they write code, they search it for errors. And when they do that, they call it debugging their code. And this also comes from Grace Hopper. Now, Grace Hopper was very rare to make mistakes in her computer code, although I'm sure that it did happen. This phrase comes from a time that there was supposedly a problem with Grace's code. And after going over her code again and again and not seeing any kind of logical error, she finally checked the literal computer and found that there was a moth in the physical computer, and removing the moth from the computer made the code run properly. So the problem was not with her code, it was with the computer. There was a literal bug in the computer, and we now use the phrase debugging our code when we're searching our code for errors. Now, about the specific high-level programming language of Python, Python is a relatively new language. It came about in around 1998, and it's meant to be a fun language. Despite maybe thinking of a snake first and foremost when you think of a Python, it was actually named after Monty Python in order to encapsulate that spirit of fun that Monty Python is known for. Python also has a very specific philosophy to it that reminds me a little bit of the rebellion that Grace Hopper had of why does it always have to be this way? So some older computer programming languages are very strict and robust and rigid, and Python aims to sort of fight that. It has this philosophy that beautiful code is better than ugly code, even if they have the same outcome. That the readability of your code is very important. We want it to be simple. We want it to be clean. We want things to be explicit about what we're doing. But one thing that you have to be aware of about Python, which would be different in other programming languages, so if you've seen other programming languages before, Python is very strict. There really ought to be one and only one way to do or accomplish something, and that way ought to be obvious. So every now and again, you'll get burned by this rule in Python where you'll be trying to do something and it just isn't working well. That's a sign that you're not thinking about it in the Python spirit. You should search for that one Python way to do things as you're learning to code in this particular language. Again, that'll maybe make sense more as we're going on. And Python really wants to focus on simplicity. Things that are complicated and convoluted are really not the Python way. So all in all, it's a pretty good language to learn. It's beautiful, it reads nice, it's as close to English as we can be in the modern programming age, and it's meant to be simple. That having been said, Python is also highly extensible, meaning that there are lots and lots of different libraries that you can bring into Python to help it understand more basic commands. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you a little bit more. Basically, every high-level programming language that you could ever learn is going to have something called reserved words. These are the words that the computer language knows. Python knows 33 words. That's it. That's the whole language that's built into Python is 33 words. And I'm not even sure that I know all of them. That's pretty standard for a programming language. However, to combat this, if you're willing to take a look at these other libraries, you can basically teach Python new words. And the word library there is really meant to invoke that visual of Python doesn't know the word, it's going to go to the library, it's going to find a book, it's going to look up the word, and as soon as it does that, Python will know what to do. So that'll expand our knowledge. For example, something like square root is not something that's built into the Python programming language, but if we tell it to look in the math book in the library, it will know that word.